Good morning. A few minutes early today, I know, but as a reminder, tomorrow, July 2nd, first Sunday of the month, we'll have worship with Holy Communion at Sutton at 9 o'clock. That'll be live on Facebook, and also worship in Our Savior's at McHenry at 10:30. You're welcome to join us live or in person for either service that way. All right. Or if you're at home to have communion ready and, bread and wine, whichever, and join us that way for Holy Communion. Today, we look at Acts 10, verses 24 through 48, the finish up of this chapter. As we looked at the first part of chapter 10 yesterday, Peter had a vision of the blanket-like thing coming down out of the sky, and or that is a couple days ago, whichever. But that was just yesterday. But Cornelius also, in Caesarea had a vision also about the same time that Peter had a vision. And Cornelius's vision was to send men to Peter to ask him to come. And he did. He sent, a very trusted, devout servant plus two others. And they had come and spent the rest of the day and the night with Peter, and they get up in the morning and take off. We finished yesterday. The next day they got up and went with them and some other believers. And then verse 24, the following day. So it wasn't just a one-day journey, a 2-day journey to get to Cornelius's house. And when they got there to Caesarea, Cornelius was anticipating their return, and it had invited his relatives, his family, and friends to be there when Peter came. It's because, he was hoping to be able to share with them, this good news of whatever it was, because this man in the white dazzling clothes had said to Cornelius, your prayers have been heard, and, God has taken note of you. And so Cornelius is excited, anticipating, what am I going to hear from Peter? And what is this news that God has? And when Peter comes, Cornelius falls at his feet and begins to worship Peter. And Peter says, hey, hold it, don't worship me. I am just a man just like you. However, I can tell you about Jesus Christ. And so Cornelius gets up and they go in, and Peter sees this whole gathering of people, and it says Peter got up, and as he talked with them, he went in and found that many had assembled. So there was a group of people there waiting, anticipating to hear what Peter had to say to them. And Cornelius, what did Cornelius shared with them that stirred their interest as well? But Peter begins his conversation with, that it's illegal for a Jew to associate with Gentiles, or associate with or visit. And then there's this big word, but, this big word, 3 letters, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone profane or unclean. God had shown Peter that all people were the same. All people were worthy of God's love and God's grace. And it's like last Sunday, I talked about value, how God values each and every one. And that value is there. And so since God had shown Peter that everyone was worthy of God's love, everyone was worthy of God's grace, he said, I came right away without hesitation. Now, what is it, or why is it that you sent for me? So then Cornelius tells Peter the same story that, he had told the 3 that he sent, about the angel coming, and about how he had been instructed by this angel to send for Peter. And then he says, so now all of us are here in the presence of God to listen to what the Lord has commanded you to say. And that is so important. We are gathered here in the presence of God. Is there any time we are not in the presence of God? I mean, sometimes we'd like to not be in the presence of God. Sometimes we like to think that, well, God won't see me do this, or I hope God doesn't see me do this, or man, I wish God hadn't seen me do that. But we are gathered, Cornelius says, in the presence of God to listen. And so Peter begins to speak, and excuse me, I had quite a session of sneezing just a little bit ago, and my nose just kind of twitches some yet. But Peter starts with, he says, I truly understand that God shows no partiality. No partiality. So it doesn't matter that I'm a Jew and you're Gentiles. It doesn't matter that I'm a man and some of you are women. It doesn't matter, anything. God shows no partiality. We are all equal and we are all important to God. He says, so God shows no partiality, but in every nation, anyone who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. And that's what God would have for everyone, to fear him and to accept him. And then Peter goes on and he talks about Jesus and how Jesus had come and the message that Jesus had, in Judea and Jerusalem, and we are witnesses. It wasn't just Peter that came. It said Peter and some others came, and so Peter and especially the other 11 disciples are witnesses. We are witnesses to all that he did. This is an eyewitness account. This is truth. This isn't something we made up. This isn't a fantasy story. This is factual, true evidence that we saw with our own eyes and we heard with our own ears. We are sharing truth. We aren't sharing made up stories. We're sharing truth. And then he talks about, in his conversation about Jesus, it says, they put him to death by hanging him on a tree, but God raised him up on the third day and allowed him to appear to us who were chosen by God as witnesses. He ate with him, drank with him, and then he commanded us to preach to the people and testify. And that goes back to Matthew 28:19. Jesus said, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teach them all that I have commanded you. So Jesus had commanded the disciples to go and to preach and to teach and to baptize and to do these things. It says he commanded us to preach to the people, testify that he is the one ordained by God as judge of living and dead, to testify that Jesus is the Messiah and how the prophets talk about him. And as Peter was still speaking to them, it says, Luke tells us, the Holy Spirit fell upon all who heard the word. The circumcised believers that had come with Peter were astonished that the gift of the Holy Spirit had been given to these Gentiles who hadn't even been baptized yet. And so they all took this opportunity to be baptized. I mean, these Gentiles that had no right to God, according to what the Jews would have thought, all of a sudden were filled with the Holy Spirit. It says they were speaking in tongues, they were extolling God, they were praising God, they were changed by the Holy Spirit. And so it says then, Peter asked, can anyone withhold the waters? We see these people have received the Holy Spirit just as we have. God shows no partiality. What a beautiful sentence to remember. God shows no partiality. He's going to love me and he's going to love you regardless of those things that we do that we would rather that he didn't see. Shows no partiality in all of that. So they were baptized and they invited Peter and those with him to stay. And they did for several days. But I think, the greatest thing to take from this lesson in chapter 10 of the book of Acts is that no one is unclean in front of God. There isn't anything that we do that is bad enough that God won't forgive us because we are valuable and he shows no partiality.